Right now, while you're watching this, something is happening half a world away that could quietly drain the savings out of your bank account. And almost nobody in Washington is telling you the truth about it. There's a narrow stretch of water, only 54 kilometers wide, that decides the price of the gas in your car, the bill on your kitchen table, and maybe even the next election. And the most powerful military on Earth, with all its carriers, all its bombs, all its billion-dollar jets, cannot keep it open. Let that sit with you for a second. Donald Trump went into this war believing it would be fast, clean, a few weeks of airstrikes, a victory speech, and back to business. Instead, America walked into something it doesn't know how to walk out of, and the more I looked into it, the more one uncomfortable thought kept coming back to me. The same thought I think a lot of you have had lately, but maybe haven't said out loud. What if we just lost a war and nobody's allowed to admit it yet? Stay with me, because what's really going on over there is bigger than anything you've been told. Here's the thing most people get wrong about what's happening in Iran right now. They think there's one war. There isn't. There are two. And once you understand that, everything starts to make sense, including why the most powerful country on Earth suddenly looks so confused. The first war is the one you see on television. American bombers, Israeli fighter jets, Tomahawk missiles streaking through the night sky over Tehran. In that war, America and Israel are winning. They've gutted Iran's air defenses. They've sunk most of its navy. They've killed a long list of senior Iranian commanders, generals, scientists, advisors. They even killed the supreme leader himself. By any traditional measure, that should be the end of it. A clean victory. Trump on a podium, declaring it done. But there's a second war. And in that second war, Iran is winning. Quietly, methodically. Without firing a single shot at an American soldier, because while the bombs were falling on Tehran, Iran turned around and went after something far more valuable than any military target. They went after the global economy itself. They went after the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow stretch of water I mentioned at the start, through which roughly 1/5 of all the oil and liquefied natural gas on this planet has to travel. Every single day. And here's what nobody in Washington wants to say on camera. You cannot bomb geography. You can destroy a missile launcher. You can flatten a base. You can kill a general. But you cannot bomb away a mountain range. And you cannot bomb away a coastline. And you cannot bomb away the simple, brutal fact that Iran sits right on top of the most important shipping lane in the world. I want you to picture it for a second. Imagine a hallway. A long, narrow hallway. Now imagine someone standing at the end of it with a baseball bat, and every time you try to walk through, they swing. You don't have to be stronger than them. You don't have to win every swing. You just have to make people afraid to walk down that hallway. That's what Iran is doing. They're not blockading the strait in any formal sense. They don't need to. They just need to fire a missile here, drop a mine there, send a drone every now and then, and suddenly, no commercial captain in his right mind wants to take his ship through. No insurance company wants to underwrite the voyage. The strait goes quiet. And the world's oil supply goes with it. And here is where it gets uncomfortable for people my age. People who lived through the 70s, who remember the gas lines, who remember the inflation that ate their parents' paychecks. Because we've seen this movie before. And we know how it ends. It ends with prices rising at the pump. It ends with families cutting back at the grocery store. It ends with somebody in Washington going on television and explaining, in that careful, lawyerly tone, why it's not really their fault. Oil was sitting at around $60 a barrel before the war. It's $100 now. And the economists who get paid to model these things will tell you something pretty straightforward. For every $10 the price of oil climbs, you eventually add roughly 3 to 4% to overall inflation. Do the math. We're already looking at 4% inflation creeping back. If this drags on, 5, 6. Numbers we haven't seen since the Biden years, the years a lot of voters punished him for at the ballot box. And Trump ran on the opposite of this. He ran on cheaper groceries. He ran on cheaper gas. He ran on no more foreign wars. Now he's got all three problems landing on his desk at the same time, and the man standing at the end of that hallway with the bat isn't tired yet. That's the war you weren't told about. Now I want you to think about something. Something that, the more I sit with it, the more it bothers me. Every American president before Trump, and I mean every single one of them, going all the way back to Jimmy Carter, looked at Iran and decided not to attack it directly. Not Reagan, not the first Bush, not Clinton, not the second Bush, even after September 11th, even after Iraq, even when the neoconservatives in his own cabinet were begging him to. Not Obama, not Biden. 8 presidents, Republicans and Democrats, hawks and doves, men who disagreed about almost everything else in this world. And yet on this one question, they all came to the same answer. Don't do it. Now, I want you to ask yourself something honestly. Were all of them cowards? Were all of them weak? Were all of them somehow missing the obvious thing that Donald Trump finally saw? Or, and I think this is the harder question, did they all know something that the current administration either forgot or chose to ignore? Because here's the truth. They knew about the hallway. They knew about the man with the bat. They knew that the moment you start dropping bombs on Iranian soil, you give Iran permission to do the one thing they've been quietly preparing to do for 45 years. Shut down the strait. Bring the world's oil to its knees. And dare you to stop them. The Trump administration walked in believing they could move faster than that. They believed that with overwhelming air power, with the F-35s and the B-2s and the bunker busters, they could decapitate the Iranian regime before Iran could even reach for its weapons. They thought it would be over in a weekend, maybe a week too at the outside. And listen, I understand the temptation. When you have the kind of military America has, every problem starts to look like a nail you can hammer down. But geography is not a nail. And a nation of 90 million people, hardened by 45 years of sanctions, sitting on a coastline 2,400 kilometers long, full of caves and tunnels and mountain passes, that is not something you flatten in a weekend. It reminds me, painfully, of another miscalculation. February of 2022, a different leader in a different capital looked at his maps and decided he could take Kiev in 3 days. 3 days. He had the tanks. He had the planes. He had the manpower. And what he didn't have was an understanding of the country he was actually invading. 4 years later, that war is still grinding on. And the man who started it cannot find a way out that doesn't look like a defeat. That parallel between Putin's 3-day war and Trump's quick war is the part of this story that, frankly, keeps me up at night. Because we used to be the ones who looked at that kind of miscalculation from the outside and shook our heads. Now we're the ones inside it. And here is the part that really lands. They killed the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. 87 years old, in poor health, probably only had a year or two left in him anyway. If he had died naturally, in his sleep, there's a real chance that Iran's next leadership would have been more pragmatic, more open to a deal, more tired of the fight than the old guard was. Instead, They killed him with a missile. They killed his wife. They killed his son. They killed his grandson. And now the man who took his place, his other son, Moshtaba, is sitting in that office with nothing left to lose and nothing left to negotiate. You don't make peace with the people who just murdered your family. You don't shake their hand and sign a treaty. You dig in. You harden. You wait them out. That is what Iran is doing right now. Waiting, and every day they wait, the price of oil climbs, and the patience of the American voter shrinks, and the window for any kind of clean ending closes a little further. The miscalculation isn't just military, it's human. And those are the hardest kind to walk back from. There's something I think we don't talk about enough in this country. Something that, if you're my age, you might find genuinely shocking the first time you really hear it. The United States is running out of bombs. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like one of those things you hear on the late-night cable shows and roll your eyes at. But it isn't. It's real. And the numbers tell a story that the Pentagon would rather not have splashed across the evening news. In the first 16 days of this war, 16 days, the U.S. military burned through more than 11,000 munitions, more than any Western military campaign since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Among those, more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Each one of those Tomahawks costs about $4 million. Do that math in your head. That's over $3 billion in Tomahawks alone, gone in a matter of weeks. Possibly a quarter of America's entire stockpile of them, and the Defense Department's plan for next year was to buy only 57 new ones. 57. To replace what we just used up in less than 3 weeks. The Patriots are running low too. The Thayad interceptors, the high-end ones that shoot down ballistic missiles aimed at our allies and our bases, we haven't received a new shipment of those since 2023. We weren't expecting any next year. We were maybe going to get 39 of them in 2027. And we used up about a quarter of what we had defending Israel during the 12-day war back in June. Now ask yourself a quiet question. If a war broke out tomorrow somewhere else, say over Taiwan, the place every general in this country has been quietly losing sleep about for a decade now, what exactly would we be defending it with? Because here's the truth nobody on the Sunday morning shows wants to say out loud. America is one country, with one defense industrial base, with one finite stockpile, and every bomb we drop on Tehran is a bomb that isn't in the warehouse when the call comes from somewhere else. I think about the men running our aircraft carriers right now. The Gerald R. Ford, 280 days at sea. 280. By the middle of this month, that ship will have set the record for the longest continuous carrier deployment since Vietnam. And the strain is showing. There was a fire on board last month that burned out the bunks of 600 sailors. 600 young men and women sleeping in shifts, doing 18-hour days, on a ship that was supposed to come home half a year ago. This is what war looks like when it stops being a press conference and starts being a job. It looks like tired men, empty magazines, maintenance crews working through the night, officers writing letters home that they hope they never have to send. And the Pentagon has already gone to Congress and asked for another $200 billion just to keep this thing going. $200 billion. To replace what we've burned and to keep burning more. And nobody knows if Congress will write that check. Nobody knows what it does to the deficit if they do. Nobody knows what it does to the next administration's budget. Nobody knows. But here's the part that gets me. The part that, when I think about it as a man who's lived through a few of these, Vietnam as a kid, Iraq as a young father, Afghanistan as a middle-aged man watching my own friends' sons get deployed, the part that always seems to repeat itself. We never really count the cost until we're already inside it. We tell ourselves it'll be quick. We tell ourselves we have the better equipment. We tell ourselves the other side will fold. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, we're sitting around a kitchen table somewhere, wondering how we ended up paying so much for something that was supposed to be over by Christmas. That's where America is right now. We're inside it. And the bill is coming. So let's lay it out plainly. Because I think when you strip away the cable news noise, the political spin, the talking heads on both sides yelling past each other, what Donald Trump is actually staring at right now is 3 doors. 3 options. And every one of them has something ugly behind it. Door number 1. He sits down at the table and negotiates with Iran while Iran is still holding a knife to the throat of the global economy. Which means Iran sets the terms. Iran decides what victory looks like. Iran walks away with concessions. Sanctions lifted, maybe assets unfrozen, maybe a nuclear program that quietly continues. And the man who promised the American voter that he would never lose a deal in his life walks out of that room having clearly lost one. That's door number 1. Door number 2. He does nothing. He declares the war over. He gives a speech. He points at the bomb damage assessments. He says we won, mission accomplished, and he walks away. But the strait stays closed. The oil keeps not flowing. The gas prices keep climbing. The inflation keeps creeping back up. And every American family that fills up their tank, every retiree on a fixed income watching their grocery bill go up week after week, every small business owner trying to keep the lights on, they all know who to blame. That's door number 2. And then there's door number 3. The one nobody wants to talk about on the record, but every general in the Pentagon is already drawing up plans for behind closed doors. Boots on the ground. American soldiers, American Marines, walking onto Iranian soil to try and physically pry that strait back open. Now I want to be careful here, because I think people throw around the words ground invasion too easily. They picture it like a video game. They don't picture what it actually looks like. Let me give you a number that might help. The invasion of Iraq in 2003, which most of you watching this remember vividly, that took about 300,000 American soldiers to launch. Another 160,000 to occupy the country afterward. And Iraq, geographically, is about a quarter the size of Iran. Iran has more than 3 times the population. If you simply scale those numbers up, you are looking at an invasion force of over 1 million soldiers. An occupation force of more than 560,000. Numbers we have not seen committed to a single theater since Vietnam in 1968. You cannot do that with a volunteer army. You just can't. The math doesn't work, which means door number 3, the full version of it, brings back something this country has not had to face since I was a young man. The draft. Selective service envelopes showing up in mailboxes. 18-year-olds at kitchen tables across America being told they have 90 days to report. Now, I don't think we go there. Not yet. I think what's actually on the table is something smaller. Something the Pentagon calls a limited ground campaign. And there are a few flavors of it being discussed right now in the briefing rooms, and each one is its own kind of bad bet. There's the option to send a special forces team deep into Iranian territory to try and seize the 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that's sitting in tunnels under a place called Isfahan, hundreds of kilometers inside hostile country. Tunnels that we ourselves collapsed with bunker busters last year. A raid that makes the Bin Laden mission look like a Sunday picnic by comparison. There's the option to seize Karg Island, the small piece of land off Iran's southwest coast that handles 90% of Iran's oil exports. easier militarily. But here's the thing. If you take Karg, you knock Iran's oil off the global market, which means oil prices go higher, not lower, which makes Trump's original problem worse, not better. And then there's the option that seems to be quietly gaining the most traction. Seizing the disputed islands in the strait itself, Abu Musa, Greater Tum, Lesser Tum, handing them to the United Arab Emirates under the banner of liberation, and using them as platforms for short-range air defenses. Every one of these is a gamble. Every one of these could fail, and none of them, not one, actually solves the underlying problem. Because Iran can still launch drones from 1,000 kilometers inland. And bombs cannot alter geography. 3 doors, all of them ugly. And the clock on the wall is ticking. There's a moment in every long war, and I've watched enough of them now to recognize it, when the country fighting it stops asking how do we win and starts asking how do we get out. And I think we are very close to that moment in America right now. Maybe we're already in it. Maybe most people just haven't said it out loud yet. I want to tell you something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Something that I don't think gets said enough by the people who go on television talking about these things. War is easy to start. War is easy to cheer for. War is easy to vote for when it's somebody else's son going. The hard part? The part nobody warns you about when you're young and full of fire. The hard part is what happens after. The part where you look around 2 years in, 5 years in, 10 years in, and you realize the people who promised it would be quick aren't in the room anymore. They've moved on to other jobs, other speaking circuits, other books. And the only people still in the room are the families holding folded flags. I think about Iraq sometimes. I think about the men I knew who came back from that war. Some of them came back changed. Some of them came back broken. Some of them didn't come back at all. And every single one of them was sent over there on a promise that it would be fast, that it would be clean, that we would be greeted as liberators, that the whole thing would pay for itself. None of that was true. We know now it wasn't true. Some of us suspected it then. And here's what bothers me about where we are right now with Iran. It is the same script, almost word for word. The same confidence, the same map presentations, the same assurances that air power will do the job, the same belief that the regime is brittle, that the people will rise up, that the whole thing will collapse like a house of cards if we just push hard enough. The Iranian regime is not popular. Let me be clear about that. A lot of Iranians hate it. A lot of young Iranians, especially young Iranian women, have risked their lives in the streets trying to bring it down. But here is the brutal lesson of history, and it's one that empires keep relearning every generation. When a foreign bomb falls on your city, you don't blame your government. You blame the people who dropped the bomb. Even if you hated your government the day before, even if you would have overthrown it yourself given another year. That's what's happening inside Iran right now. We have managed in a span of weeks to take a deeply unpopular regime, a regime that was probably one supreme leader's funeral away from a real internal reckoning, and we have transformed it into a wounded animal with public sympathy behind it. We did that. Not them. Us. And then there's the other side of this, the piece I think about late at night when the house is quiet. Because America is not the only one watching this play out. China is watching. Russia is watching. North Korea is watching. Every adversary we have in the world, and a few friends we'd rather not lose, are sitting back right now, studying what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and taking notes. What are they learning? They're learning that the world's most powerful military can be tied down, exhausted, stretched thin, emptying its arsenal, by a country with no real air force and a few thousand cheap drones. They're learning that geography still matters more than technology. They're learning that the United States, for all its strength, has a finite supply of patience, a finite supply of money, and a finite supply of munitions. That last one, that's the one that should chill you. Because if Beijing is watching all this and doing the same math we're doing, counting our tomahawks, counting our THAAD interceptors, watching how many destroyers we've had to peel off other theaters just to keep this one going, then they are also watching a window open, a window of American weakness. And windows like that don't stay open forever, but they don't stay closed forever either. This is the part nobody puts in the campaign speeches. The part that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. The cost of a war is never just the war you're in. It's the war you can no longer afford to fight when the next one comes. And the next one is coming. It always is. The only question is whether we'll have anything left in the closet when it does. That's what I mean when I say America is sleepwalking. It's not that anybody's stupid. It's that nobody's looking past next month's news cycle. And empires that stop looking past the next news cycle don't stay empires for very long. Hey, before I continue, real quick, if you've made it this far into the video with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and stick around with us. We're putting out videos every single day breaking down exactly what's happening in the world. The way I wish someone had broken it down for me when I was younger. And honestly, I think people my age, people who've lived long enough to see a few of these wars come and go, we owe it to the younger folks coming up to make sure they understand what's really at stake. Not the cable news version, the real version. So hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. All right, back to it. Because here's the part of this story that doesn't make the front page, the part that doesn't get the prime time segment, the part that, frankly, the people in Washington would rather you didn't think about too long. The people who pay for this war are not the people who started it. I want you to picture somebody, a man in his 60s, maybe early 70s, retired, worked his whole life, put 3 kids through school, paid off his house just in time to watch his pension stop stretching the way it used to. He turns on the news in the morning and they're talking about oil hitting $100 a barrel, and he does the quick math in his head about what that means for his heating bill this winter. And he feels something tighten in his chest. Not panic, just that quiet, familiar dread that working people of a certain age know very well. The dread of watching the numbers move in the wrong direction and knowing you don't have many more years left to make it back. That man didn't vote for this war. That man wasn't asked about this war. That man was promised, in fact, that there wouldn't be a war. And now, he's the one who's going to pay for it at the pump, at the grocery store, at the pharmacy counter, on his electric bill. That's how it always goes. The people who make the decisions don't pay the bills. They never have. They never will. And the people who pay the bills don't make the decisions. They just live with them. I think about the small business owner in Ohio whose trucking costs just doubled overnight. I think about the young couple in Florida who finally saved up enough for a down payment on a house, only to watch mortgage rates climb back up because inflation is climbing back up because oil is climbing back up. I think about the farmer in Iowa whose diesel costs are eating his margins alive. I think about the single mother in Arizona deciding whether she can afford to drive her kid to soccer practice this week. This is what war looks like at home. It doesn't look like soldiers marching down Main Street. It looks like 1,000 small surrenders at 1,000 kitchen tables, week after week, month after month, while the people who started it all are on television explaining why it's not really their fault. And here's what's coming. If Iran keeps that strait closed through the end of April and into May. Oxford Economics, not a left-wing outfit, not a right-wing outfit, just a serious economic modeling firm, has already said it. If oil hits $140 a barrel and stays there, the global economy tips into a mild recession. Mild, that's the word they used. Mild. Tell that word to the guy who just lost his job because his company couldn't absorb the fuel costs anymore. Tell it to the family that just had to move in with their adult kids because they couldn't keep up with the rent. Mild. Recessions are never mild for the people inside them. They're mild for the people writing the reports. And the timing is what really gets me, because the midterms are in November. And every single thing I just described, the prices, the layoffs, the squeezed budgets, every one of those things is going to land squarely in the laps of American voters right around the time they're being asked to cast a ballot. Iran knows this. Of course they know this. They read our newspapers. They watch our networks. They understand our political calendar probably better than half our own congressmen do. So they wait. And they squeeze. And every week that passes, the pressure builds. Not on the people in the briefing rooms, on the people at the kitchen tables. That's the war. The real one. The one nobody declared. I want to leave you with something, not an answer. I don't have one. Anybody who tells you they have a clean answer to what's happening in Iran right now is either selling you something or hasn't thought about it long enough. What I have instead is a feeling. The kind of feeling a man gets when he's seen this particular shape of trouble before. I've watched my country walk into wars I didn't understand and watched it walk back out of them years later, smaller than when it went in. Not weaker on paper, weaker in some other way, weaker in the quiet way. The way a man is weaker after burying a friend he wasn't ready to bury. The way a marriage is weaker after a fight that never really got resolved, just buried. That kind of weaker. We started something we don't know how to finish. That's the truth of it. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. The bombs are still falling. The bills are still coming. And the man at the end of that long, narrow hallway with the bat in his hands, he hasn't put it down. He's not going to put it down. Not for Donald Trump. Not for the next president. Not for the one after that. Iran has learned what every weaker power eventually learns when it stands across from a stronger one. You don't have to win. You just have to outlast. You just have to make the cost of continuing higher than the cost of walking away. That's it. That's the whole strategy. It's the strategy the Viet Cong used against us in the 60s. It's the strategy the Taliban used against us in the 2000s. It's the strategy the Ukrainians are using against the Russians right now. And it is the strategy Iran is using against us today. The lesson keeps repeating, and we keep not learning it. I think the saddest part of all of this, and I really do mean sad, in the old sense of the word, the heavy sense, is that we knew. Every president for 45 years knew. They all looked at this map, at this strait, at this man with this bat, and they all decided the same thing. Not now, not yet, not worth it. And then, one administration decided differently. And now we are all living inside that decision. All of us. The voter in Ohio, the retiree in Florida, the young soldier on the Gerald R. Ford who hasn't seen his family in 9 months, the Iranian mother who lost her son to an American bomb, the American mother who's about to lose hers to an Iranian drone. All of us, inside one man's decision. That's the part nobody puts on the news. The part you have to sit with on your own. So I'll leave you with this. The next time somebody on television tells you a war is going to be quick, pay attention to who's saying it. Pay attention to whether they have a son the right age. Pay attention to whether they fill up their own gas tank. Pay attention to whether they know the price of a gallon of milk this week, because the people who pay for wars and the people who promise them are almost never the same people. And until we figure out how to fix that, we're going to keep walking into the same hallway, again and again, generation after generation, surprised every single time by the man at the end with the bat. If this video gave you something to think about, anything at all, do me one favor, subscribe to the channel. Share this with 5 people you actually care about, not strangers on social media. 5 people. Your brother, your old college roommate, the friend you haven't called in too long. Send it to them and ask what they think. Because conversations like this one don't happen by themselves anymore. We have to start them. And down in the comments, I want to hear from you. Honestly, no talking points, no flag waving, just the truth of what you're feeling about all of this. And tell me what you want me to break down next. What war? What country? What story do you need somebody to actually sit down and explain to you the way a friend would, not the way a network would? I'll be here. I'll be reading. Thank you for staying with me to the end.